It's my real pleasure today to have Melanie Miller-Foster, Dr. Melanie Miller-Foster, and Dr. Daniel Foster on this particular Zoom session to talk a little bit about an amazing initiative that they created several years back to help respond to the needs of agricultural educators and trainers, and how they have bravely included poetry in the mix of that initiative and what they're learning as a result of all of that bravery. But let me first introduce them. It's really great to have you both here. They're both at Penn State University, Pennsylvania State University in the US. Melanie is an associate teaching professor of international agriculture. Within the office, she works within the Office of International Programs in the College of Agriculture there at Penn State. She's responsible for leadership of what's called a dual title graduate degree program in international agriculture and development, where she advises all of the enrollees in that program and instructs the foundational course for the program. So she's a real key mover and shaker in that groundbreaking program at Penn State. In addition, she, with Daniel, they both co-founded the Global Teach Ag Network in the Center for Professional Personnel Development in the College of Agriculture. Melanie's research program has an active focus on global competency, global learning, and transformative learning experiences with active programs in Latin America and Asia. And I can attest to the fact that she is passionate about helping students, instructors, and programs as they all want to tell their story of global impact. Daniel Foster is an associate professor in the Department of Agricultural Economics, Sociology, and Education. He has a lifelong passion to serve as a positive change agent. He's driven to facilitating engaged scholarship that curates and stimulates innovative bridging industry, secondary, and post-secondary, and community-centered learning in food, fiber, and natural resources. He draws heavily from a lifetime of engagement activities in agricultural education in many, many states across the US and across the world in many countries to develop scholarship that generates global impact, one student and one community at a time. I am just really honored, tickled pink, to have both of these key colleagues, key leaders on the video. And I wanted to open things up by just simply asking them if they have anything that they'd like to say in welcoming the viewers to this Zoom session, and then we'll start talking a little bit specifically about GLAG. But any kind of opening welcome that you'd like to give, either Melanie or Daniel?
Absolutely. We couldn't be more pleased to be here with you, Hiram, and appreciate the support, because what we know is that the task in front of us, the task of all of us as citizens of planet Earth, is a requirement to pitch in, to collaborate, to help. That it won't be one discipline, it won't be one area, it will be people working in concert and in collaboration to address these critical issues. The artist and the scientist hand in hand, making sure that we're not only focused on perhaps winning the mind of others, but also winning their heart. Because the work that we have in front of us isn't easy, and we're going to have to persist. And it seems to be that we all work harder when it's something we truly care about that touches our heart, as opposed to just the approach is the logical, oh yeah, we need to do that. So thank you for having us to share.
Well, thank you for being here, Daniel. Melanie, any greetings that you'd like to send out to the viewership here?
Sure. Yes. Thank you. It's an absolute pleasure to be here with you, Hiram. And I just want to start off here at the top by saying thank you for your bravery in bringing poetry into the anti-hunger space. Because like Daniel said, it's going to take many people from many different walks of life all pulling together to solve this really pernicious issue of food insecurity that we have in our world. So thank you for your leadership as well.
Well, it's all mutual thanks here. You created, I don't know now how many years ago, but I know it's been several, an initiative called Global Learning in Agriculture, and you created a community around that GLAG, or what we call GLAG group, as a way of what I call kind of backstopping, helping, and also learning from agricultural educators around the country and really around the world as they interact then with learners, student learners, but also even adult learners. Before we discuss the role of the creative arts in GLAG, could you just briefly describe kind of what GLAG is all about? Did I get it right in describing it? And what are its goals and your vision for GLAG?
Well, you're asking people to talk about a passion project, Hiram, so we have to be careful not to go off or to spend too much time on it. But when we talk about the global learning and agriculture community, I usually start with who are we serving and who is in that community? And it's really easy. I can just say teachers matter. Now, where do I go from that? Or what does that mean? Well, I believe, and I might say that one or two times even in this interview, that each and every one of us that walk this earth is an educator in one way or another. Truly. Some of us choose to teach in that very formal, traditional way in the classroom where we're assigned to transfer knowledge. Others of us teach perhaps of a role that would be non-formal through extension and outreach, and not perhaps going through the systematic school-based system. But all of us in some way, I believe, engage in informal as role models, as educators. How we act and interact with other human beings is teaching those around us. It's laying that ground. So we have this belief that teachers matter, and we want to develop a community where they can share and be supported. And that's teachers of any discipline. So agriculture, yes, but also social studies, English, theater, science, any context. And we just talked through those formal, non-formal, and informal, and very important to Melanie and I, in any location, whether they're in Mississippi, Missouri, or Montana in the US, or perhaps even in Mozambique in Africa. Where do we provide a space for educators to come together to share some of their common challenges and opportunities?
Excellent.
Melanie, I didn't do a good job of sharing about the goals besides the space. Is there anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, so I guess, I would back up a little, and I think this is the beauty of this. Daniel and I come out of different fields, and so really it took both of us coming together to recognize this issue and think of how we might come together to solve it. So coming out of an international development background, I was in these spaces hearing a lot from international organizations kind of scratching their head and thinking, like, how do we inspire the next generation of youth to become involved in agriculture? And, there was just a lot of talk about how we might engage youth, how we might inspire youth, but teachers were never really a part of that conversation. And teachers are those folks that are with our youth on a daily basis. They live and work in the communities that they serve. They're familiar with both the community issues, but also the assets that are available in the communities. And so there really could be a linchpin in the fight against food insecurity if we just empower them. And so that's the name of the game for the GLAG community, is that we're really looking to inspire and empower educators from around the world to get involved in this fight against food insecurity.
And I think uniquely so. I mean, I don't know the full field, I'm sure, all the nooks and crannies in it. But my sense is that you all have focused uniquely on those educators as a way of touching, as you've just said, Melanie, so many young people. And so that's one reason I've been so anxious to work with you folks, because I think you've got a kind of a sweet spot there where you're working with those who are so influential as young people develop, and in non-formal or in more non-formal ways, those instructors who work with community members directly as well. So about 3 years ago, I think it was, you invited some rowdy poets into the room to help with delivering the message. And as Daniel was saying, we need to grab people's minds and logic with data and statistics and know-how, but we also need to reach their hearts. And that's where one place I think that the arts and poetry specifically can help. And you did that through GLAG. Tell us a little bit about why you've done that outreach partnership, as Daniel would say, with the creatives.
Yeah, so I can kick us off on this one. Hiram, I always go back to that really magical moment where you and I were attending a conference in Washington, D.C. You had arranged for a poet to come and open the conference. And I just thought that was such a really interesting and impactful moment, because here we were, a bunch of professionals who kind of work in this space, and we really needed to be reminded and grounded in the seriousness of this work. And that's what the poet was able to do by bringing in his experience and reading his poem in front of our audience. Just made that feeling very real. And I thought that was such an appropriate use of poetry, and that it could be and should be brought into other spaces. And this is something that we could use to engage people who enjoy different subject matter. Maybe they're not enrolled in agriculture, but they are, of course, enrolled in an English class, or some kind of language arts or art class. And this is a way to show people how they could get involved. And so that was really the genesis of the idea. That was the inspiration. And then the rest is history, right?
Well, let's talk a little bit about that rest. I remember very fondly that same meeting and your wonderful reaction to it. And I think it was shortly thereafter that we began to visit about, well, through GLAG, how could we incorporate some of the creative arts? Where do you see it going? We have, I think, a fairly active creative arts team in GLAG called GLAG Creates. Where do you see things going in, let's say, 3 to 5 years, specifically with the arts and GLAG? Any thoughts on that?
Absolutely. What makes me most excited, I mean, it's funny, like I started off talking about how I think that we're all teachers, right? And people need to view themselves as teachers in that role of society. Well, what I find of some of my formal teachers is that they're very hesitant to perhaps call themselves creatives, artists, or poets. And I have to convince them that they can tap into that inner gift and talent that they have and present that in many different types of ways. So I'm so proud that as we design out this community, it's by teachers for teachers. So we provide an excuse and a reason, support, and resources for teachers and educators to help other teachers and educators let their light shine in this creative space. And so we have a drama teacher who's also an ag teacher who's leading this action team, Nicole Weaver, called in our community, we have GLAG Creates, and they're doing an arts smash event. It's in February, and would love for everybody to come in because the community is meant to be inclusive, to cheer on. So you ask, where do we go? Well, it's continuing to provide ways for people to think, what I call put their noggin on, to say, hey, we've talked about how poetry might be captured and used in instructing about food, fiber, and natural resources and addressing food security, how poetry could be powerful. But have we talked about photography? Have we talked about theater? Have we talked about music? Have we talked about all the other different mediums of art that could be captured to help us reach not only learning outcomes in this space, but to advance public awareness? So I think that's going to continue to be something that we build on in the next 3 to 5 years. Now, here's the big challenge, and where I always ask for people's help. Because of my profession and what I do and where I work, I feel very comfortable and know high school agriculture teachers. There's 12,000 of them. I can get a hold of them. I can let them know about opportunities. But if we're really going to be inclusive of all these educators and viewpoints and walks of life, I don't know how to invite the drama teachers of America or the world, or the music teachers of the world. So the challenge comes is finding influence or people who are passionate in those communities that can carry the message back and say, hey, this is free, come back and support. This is an inclusive space for people to share innovation.
Excellent points, Daniel. You know, the creative notion of involving the arts alongside the science, I think, is something that I'd like in my lifetime to see groups that, for example, support science work, and those groups that support poetry work, to open up their funding instruments, often called grants, and allow for some amazingly innovative partnerships. Right now, if you go to USDA grants programs, there is basically no place creatives can be supported. There might be a few very, very small nooks and crannies, but there's no obvious and promoted way for that to happen. And similarly, on the flip side, the poetry, the Academy of American Poets, all sorts of incredibly important groups in the poetry world aren't real yet inclusive of involving some of the scientific community. So I'd like to see that begin to happen.
I love that. I think when we talk about that, it's because people always say about the magic happening outside of your comfort zone, but your dead darn comfort zone is so comfortable that it's really hard to leave and talk to others unlike yourself. And I think I just have to underscore that for these big dreams, a vision of collaborative work, that I think the foundation is relationships. And in order for relationships to come, this is really, in the shortest phrase possible, what I believe to be the essence of the GLAG community vision, which is the proximity promise, that if we put passionate people in the same place, awesome will happen. If we put passionate people in the same proximity, awesomeness will occur. And that's the vision of GLAG. So how do I get those people in the same space so that they can start sharing those ideas? Well,
here's to awesome. And you all have already created quite a bit of it, but you're continuing to blaze the trail. Before we sign off here, are there any thoughts that you really, really, really wanted to share before we finish up here today? And by the way, we'll be putting the web link to GLAG in the cover note that goes out with this recording. But anything that you'd like to leave us with, either or both of you?
Yeah, actually, I'll just put out a call for any teacher of any kind watching this video to try poetry with your learners, even on a really small scale. So I myself, as an international agriculture person, I don't have any particular training, but we do have some resources in the GLAG community to get you started. But there's so many different forms of poetry that you might do, whether it's something like a haiku, which is formulaic. And I feel like that's for scientists right there. It has a formula. Just, fill it in. And you could even stretch yourself a little and do blackout poetry. There's so many different kinds. And so I think that there are easy ways for you to kind of dip your toe into the pool of poetry and just try it. I've been really surprised how I've been able to use it with my learners here at Penn State and beyond, and how receptive and excited they are about that. So I want to say that here, just to make sure that we're not, ignoring, this idea to just dive right in.
And we're here to help as well. If
Absolutely.
You have a little bit of hesitancy on that front. Thank you, Melanie. Daniel, any last words from you?
Just one question that I'd like for everybody to reflect on. If we're all teachers in one way or another, what are you teaching others today? And I think that's a question that we can think about each day. What lessons are we teaching those around us through our actions, our words, and our thoughts and views of the world.
You've taught me today the whole definition of enthusiasm and passion. So I do thank you both for being here, and keep going. You're doing really important work, and we're all behind it. So you just, both of you, keep going. Thanks
Thanks.
again
Thank you,
for
Hiram.
being here. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.